She said it without breaking stride. "That woman needs to be removed from my accounts today." One phone call. That was all it took. And by the time the afternoon light shifted across the marble floors of the Harrington Grand Hotel, Dede Owusu was standing in the staff corridor on the second floor, holding a cardboard box, staring at her own reflection in the polished doors of the service elevator. 6 years. That was how long she had poured herself into that building. But here is what Miriam Bondzie could not have known that morning, standing in the lobby with her phone pressed to her ear, and her mind already 10 steps ahead. She could not have known that 22 months later, she would be sitting on a cold wooden bench outside a community center on Carling Avenue, her voice cracking, asking this same woman for a miracle. The woman she was about to erase. If you believe that the way we treat people finds its way back to us, that the doors we close on others sometimes become the doors we find locked when we need them most, then stay with me. Because what happened to this family over the next 2 years is not a story about revenge. It is a story about grace. And grace, when it comes from someone who had every reason in the world to turn away, is the most powerful thing there is. Let me take you back to where it all began. Miriam Bondzie had not always been the kind of woman who made phone calls like that. She had come to Canada from Kumasi at 23 with a single duffel bag and a cousin's address on a piece of paper, folded so many times the creases had worn through. She had cleaned offices in Gatineau for 2 winters. She had taken night courses in business administration at Algonquin College. She had married a good man named Theo, had 2 children, a son, Kafui, and a daughter, Yaba, and had built, year by year, a property development firm that eventually put her name on 3 downtown Ottawa buildings. She sat on the board of the Ottawa Arts Foundation. She co-chaired the annual gala for children's health. She gave speeches about the importance of community and the value of hard work. People wrote things about her in the paper. She had a publicist now. Theo had passed 8 years ago quietly in his sleep. Miriam had not slowed down after that. She had sped up. She poured herself into the work the way some people pour themselves into grief, moving fast so nothing could catch her. At the Harrington Grand, she was what the general manager, Stephen Harrow, privately called a Tier 1 patron. Her company booked 6 corporate retreats a year through the hotel. Her foundation gala filled the grand ballroom every November. Her presence in the building was worth $3.1 million annually in contracts, and everyone from the front desk to the executive floor knew it. Miriam walked those corridors with the kind of quiet authority that does not need to announce itself. Staff smiled at her. Managers straightened when she entered a room. She did not say good morning to the housekeeping staff. She did not learn the name of the woman who brought her the same order of rooibos tea every time she came in for a board meeting. She moved through the hotel the way a current moves through water, not unkind exactly, not deliberately cruel, just so certain of her own direction that everyone else became part of the background. Almost everyone. Dede Owusu had worked at the Harrington Grand for 6 years as a senior banquet coordinator. She was 34 years old, born in Ottawa to parents who had come from the Volta region of Ghana. Her father had driven a school bus for the Ottawa Catholic School Board for 22 years. Her mother, Mama Ewaraba, had been a seamstress who could reproduce any pattern from memory, and who could also always tell when one of her customers was carrying something heavier than the dress they came in for. "You sew the person, not just the fabric," Mama Ewaraba used to say, pressing a cup of tea into someone's hands before the measuring tape came out. "You look at them and you make them feel like they are worth the trouble." Dede had taken that into every shift for 6 years. She knew the names of the regular guests on the conference circuit. She knew which clients were lactose intolerant and which executive from the Dental Association needed a chair with extra back support, and which family, every Easter without fail, booked the same corner table by the window to mark the anniversary of someone they had lost. She did these things without being asked, without making notes in any system, without expecting thanks. She simply carried people the way her mother had carried her clients' measurements, in a place inside herself where nothing got lost. Her supervisor had pulled her aside once, near the end of a long Friday shift, and said, Dede, in 11 years managing events at this hotel, I have never received a single complaint about you. Not one. Do you know how rare that is? Dede had smiled. That's Mama's doing, not mine. Her supervisor had laughed, but Dede meant it. She was not loud. She didn't push for recognition. She showed up, she learned the names, she set the table with care, and she went home. She was exactly the kind of person who holds a place together without anyone realizing it. Until the afternoon, everything changed. It was a Wednesday in October, the kind of Ottawa afternoon where the light goes golden just before it goes gray, and the air smells like something ending. Dede was navigating the main corridor on the second floor, pushing a cart of champagne flutes for a late afternoon reception. The corridor narrows near the turn toward the executive boardrooms. She came around the corner carefully, the way she always did. Miriam was coming from the opposite direction, phone to her ear, heels clicking on the marble, eyes fixed somewhere ahead of her. They nearly collided. Dede stopped the cart on instinct, clean, fast, but one flute at the edge of the top rack slid forward. Dede caught it. The flute was safe, but a small splash of water from the base, residual from washing, dropped onto the sleeve of Miriam's blazer. Miriam stopped walking. She looked at the sleeve, then she looked up at Dede. "I am so sorry," Dede said immediately. Her voice was calm and clear. "It was the corner. I should have come slower. Let me get something for that." Miriam looked at the sleeve again, then back at Dede. And something about the way Dede looked back at her settled under Miriam's skin like a splinter. It was not rudeness, it was not attitude, it was just steadiness. Dede was not afraid of her. She was not groveling, she was not shrinking. She was simply a person apologizing to another person, the way one human being does to another when something goes wrong by accident, as equals do. Miriam was not accustomed to that. She said nothing, she walked away. But she looked back once. Dede was already repositioning the flute on the cart, checking the others, moving on. Quiet, completely unbothered. Miriam's jaw tightened. She did not know why that moment stayed with her, but it did. 2 weeks later, Miriam's daughter Yaba flew in from Vancouver. She was engaged, getting married in the spring, and her bridal shower was being held at the Harrington Grand. An intimate afternoon event, 12 guests, organized through the hotel's events team. Dede was assigned as lead coordinator. Yaba was nothing like her mother. She said thank you every time someone poured her water. She learned Dede's name in the first 5 minutes and used it for the rest of the afternoon. She laughed loudly and apologized to her guests when the speeches ran long and the guests said, "Please, keep going." By the time the afternoon ended, 3 of the guests had found Dede privately to tell her it was the most thoughtfully run event they had attended in years. Yaba hugged Dede at the door. Honestly, she said, this felt like family, not like a hotel. She held on for a moment longer than she needed to. "Thank you." And then Miriam walked in. She had come straight from a foundation meeting, already carrying the particular tension of a day that had not gone the way she'd needed it to. She came into the room, saw her daughter's easy smile, and then, across the room, she saw Dede. The sleeve, the steady eyes, the woman who had not been afraid. Miriam pulled Stephen Harrow aside before she left. What she told him, she would not be able to repeat out loud to anyone for a very long time. Because out loud it sounded like almost nothing. That the coordinator had been dismissive, that a remark was made that made one of the guests uncomfortable. That Miriam was not at ease having her associated with family events going forward. None of it was true. Dede had done nothing wrong. But Miriam Bondie's contracts were worth $3.1 million a year to the Harrington Grand. And Stephen Harrow sat with that weight on one side of the scale and a coordinator's career on the other, and he made the decision he would later describe, in a rare private moment, as the one he most regretted in his professional life. He called Dede in the following morning. He could not look at her directly. "A formal complaint has been filed," he said quietly, "regarding conduct at yesterday's event." "Filed by whom?" He paused too long. "Mrs. Bonzie," Dede said. "It was not a question." Silence. Dede's voice, when it came, was very quiet. "Stephen, 6 years. You know my record. 6 years and not one complaint. You said that yourself, and now you're sitting here telling me." "It came from the board level, Dede. He finally looked at her. His eyes were wet. "I'm sorry, it came from above." Above meant the board. Above meant the contracts. Above meant Miriam. Dede stood up slowly. She was not going to cry in this office, not here. "I understand," she said. She cleaned out her desk that afternoon, her spare pair of flats. The small photograph of Mama Ewaraba she kept taped inside her drawer. A card a bride had given her 2 years ago, written in looping handwriting. "You made us feel like the only people in the world that day. Thank you for that." She put everything in a box. She carried it to the service elevator. She pressed the button for the parkade. The doors closed. 6 years, and she left through the same entrance where the linen deliveries came in. The thought you comfort yourself with after treating someone badly is that they will be fine. They are resilient. They will land somewhere else. You tell yourself this so you don't have to sit with what you've done, so you can go to dinner. Miriam went to a foundation board meeting that week. She reviewed contracts. She flew to Vancouver to see Yaba. She kept moving the way she always did. Dee did not sleep well for the first 2 weeks. She stayed at Mama Iwaraba's house in Nepean. Her mother did not ask many questions at first. She made pepper soup. She put on the radio. She sat with her daughter in the kitchen the way she used to sit with clients who came in upset, patient and present, and not in a hurry for anything to be resolved. On the 5th night, Dee told her everything. The corridor, the cart, the water on the sleeve, the look in the woman's eyes, the bridal shower, the lie, the box she carried through the delivery entrance. Mama Iwaraba listened without interrupting. When it was over, she reached across the table and held her daughter's hands. "Do you remember what I always told you?" "You sew the person, not the fabric," Dede said. Her voice was thin. "And did you do that?" "I did." "Then you are not carrying anything that belongs to you, my daughter." Mama Ewaraba squeezed her hands. "That weight is hers. She may not feel it today. She may not feel it for a long time. But she will carry it, and the only question for you is what you do with the time while she carries it." 2 months later, Dee found a position at the Ottawa Cultural Center, a community space in the West End that ran programming for Ottawa's African diaspora. The pay was significantly less than what she had earned at the Harrington Grand. The building needed work. Some weeks, the budget for an event ran out before the flowers arrived, but the people who walked through those doors needed what she could do, and Dede needed to be where she was needed. She organized a Ghanaian Independence Day celebration that drew 3 times the expected attendance. She coordinated a fundraiser for a Congolese family whose home had burned. She set up a weekly tea gathering for elderly women from Sierra Leone who had no family left in the city, and who, she noticed, always arrived 45 minutes early, not because they were punctual, but because they wanted somewhere to be expected. She learned their names. She knew which ones took their tea without sugar, and which one's grandson had just started university out west, and she always remembered to ask. Nobody covered it in a newspaper. Nobody mentioned it at a gala. But if you walked into that center on any given Tuesday afternoon, you could feel what one person does to a room when they have decided, simply and without ceremony, that everyone in it matters. Miriam did not think about Dede Owusu. That is the particular privilege of people who operate from financial power. They make decisions in minutes that reshape other people's lives, and then they move on. Life kept moving. Until the morning of October 3rd, when her phone rang at 7:45 and Sefakor Quay's assistant was on the line. Voice stretched over the words, "Mrs. Bonzie, Sefakor was in an accident on the 417 last night. She's stable, but she won't be leaving hospital for at least 3 weeks. We are so sorry." Miriam sat down on the edge of her bed. Kafui's wedding was in 11 days. Sefakor Quay was the finest wedding planner in Ottawa. She had spent 9 months building Kafui's wedding from the ground up. Every vendor relationship, every timeline, every personalized detail for 214 guests lived in Sefakor's mind and her files and her 20 years of professional trust. There was no version of this that could be handed to a stranger. Stephen Harrow called Miriam at noon. He had spoken with Sefakor that morning. She had been clear, even through the pain medication, with the particular clarity that comes when someone knows exactly what they are talking about. There was one person she trusted at this level. One person she had worked alongside twice and who had never once lost a thread, never once made a single guest feel like a number on a list. Her name is Dede Owusu, Stephen said. She used to work here. The line went very quiet. I know who she is, Miriam said. She did not sleep that night. She lay in her room and listened to Ottawa settle into the dark. The rain on Wellington Street, the old radiator ticking in the corner, and she thought about a Wednesday afternoon in October, a champagne flute, a drop of water on a blazer sleeve, and the eyes of a woman that had unsettled her not because they were unkind, but because they saw her clearly, as a person, not as a patron, not as a number on a contract, just a person. At 2 in the morning, she got up and went to her study. She typed the name into her browser. She found the Ottawa Cultural Center page, a photo of a Ghanaian independence celebration, Dede in the middle of it, surrounded by children in kente cloth, laughing. Another photo, a row of elderly women at a holiday tea, and Dede leaning down to hear something a woman with a cane was saying, her face entirely open, entirely present. She looked happy. Miriam stared at that photo for a long time, then she closed the laptop. She put her head in her hands, and she did something she had not done since the week Theo died. She cried. Not the composed, private kind she had permitted herself on difficult days. The other kind. The kind that starts somewhere you forgot existed. The kind that shakes you and will not be directed or controlled or finished quickly. She cried because her son's wedding was 11 days away, and it was in danger. She cried because the only person who could hold it together was the person she had dismantled. She cried because she had told a lie small enough to say out loud in 20 seconds and large enough to take 6 years of someone's professional life. She cried because she had told that lie and then gone to dinner, and then a foundation meeting, and then Vancouver, and then more meetings. And she had never, not once, thought about the woman who had carried a box through the delivery entrance. Not once until now. The next morning, Miriam drove to Carling Avenue alone. No assistant, no phone in her hand. She wore a coat she had owned for years and flat shoes she hadn't reached for since before the foundation grew into what it was now. She parked on the street. The cultural center was a converted former church. There was a hand-painted mural along the side wall. Bright yellows, deep reds, vivid greens. A poster in the window advertised a community dinner on Friday. The parking lot had a long crack running through it that someone had lined with a narrow strip of chrysanthemums, as though they had decided if the crack was going to be there anyway, it might as well be beautiful. Dee came to the front door and stopped when she saw her. The two women stood a few feet apart in the pale October light. Mrs. Bondzie, Dede said, the same eyes. Mrs. Owusu, Miriam's voice was not steady. Can we talk, please? Dee looked at her for a moment, then she nodded. There's a bench out back. They sat. A single maple tree stood at the edge of the small courtyard, half bare, the remaining leaves the color of old copper. Miriam looked at her hands. She had argued with city councilors. She had negotiated contracts worth more than most people would see across a lifetime. But sitting on a cold wooden bench in the yard behind a community center in West Ottawa, she had nothing prepared, no language, no strategy. So she told the truth. All of it. The corridor, the cart. What she had felt when Dee looked at her without fear, not the sanitized version, the real one. That Dede's steadiness had bothered her, not because it was wrong, but because it was right, and Miriam had become someone who did not want to be seen that clearly. She told her about the bridal shower, about Yaba's face when she left, about what she had known in her chest even then. She told her exactly what she had said to Stephen Harrow. The specific words, the specific lie. She did not make it smaller, she did not frame it, she just said it. The courtyard was quiet. Wind moved through the maple tree. A pigeon landed on the fence, considered them briefly, and left. My son's wedding is in 11 days, Miriam said. Safakor Kwai was in an accident. She says you are the only one, and I know. Her voice cracked completely. She did not try to fix it. I know I have no right to be sitting here asking you for anything. I know that, but Kafui did nothing wrong. He is a good man. He deserves a wedding that honors him, and I don't know how to do this without you. Dede was quiet for a long time. She thought about the service elevator, the box, the delivery entrance. She thought about Mama Iwaraba at the kitchen table holding her hands. That weight is hers, my daughter. She thought about Kafui, whom she had never met. And she thought about Yaba, who had learned her name in 5 minutes and used it like it mattered, and who had held on a beat longer than she needed to at the door. Send me Sephicor's files tonight, Dede said. I'll need access to every vendor contact by morning. Miriam looked up. I'm not coming back to the Harrington Grand, Dede said, and I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because 200 people deserve to celebrate properly, and because Sephicor asked. Miriam nodded. She was holding herself together by a thread she could feel. Thank you, she said. It came out barely above a whisper. Go home, Dede said. Let me work. 11 days is not enough time. It is also exactly enough time if the right person is standing in the middle of it. Dede did not sleep more than 5 hours on any of those nights. She met with every vendor. She reconfirmed every timeline. She walked the grand ballroom 4 times in the 48 hours before the wedding and found 3 things that needed adjusting. Small things that everyone else had moved past. The angle of the uplighting on the head table. A gap in the floral arrangement on the 3rd row. A miscommunication between the catering team and the kitchen about the timing of the first course that would have meant a 20-minute gap in service during the most important part of the evening. She corrected all 3 without saying a word to anyone about it. On the night of the wedding, she stood at the side of the ballroom and watched 214 people eat and laugh and cry and dance. She watched Kafui hold his new wife's face in his hands during their first dance like she was the most important thing he had ever been trusted with. 90 minutes into the reception, the sound system cut out. The MC, midway through introducing the best man, stopped speaking. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else looked around the room. The space began to shift in that particular way rooms shift when something has gone wrong, and nobody knows what to do about it. Dede was already in the corridor, phone to her ear. She had run 2 events at the Cultural Center with this AV company. She had the lead technician's direct number in her phone from a Saturday afternoon last March when a microphone had failed during a community remembrance ceremony, and she had needed someone she could trust to get there fast. She called it. 12 minutes later, sound came back. The MC made a joke about the speeches being so moving even the speakers needed a moment to collect themselves. The room laughed. The best man delivered his speech. Kafui cried at the 2nd paragraph. His wife reached over and held his hand under the table. 214 people never knew. After the reception, after the last guest had gone, and the night staff were beginning to move through the ballroom, Miriam found Dede in the corridor reviewing the handover checklist. Dede looked tired the way you look when you have given everything to something that deserved everything. Miriam waited until they were alone. It was perfect, she said quietly, every moment of it. It was Kafui and his wife, Dede said. I just made sure nothing got in the way. Miriam reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. There is a formal letter inside, to the hotel, filed with the employment record, with the full truth, drawn up by my own legal counsel. And there is a check. I know you, she said. Keep the check, Dede said. Miriam's hand stayed in the air between them. There's one thing I need from you, Dede said. Go home tonight. Call Yaba. Tell her what happened, the real version, all of it. Not the version that makes you look like you had reasons. The true one. Miriam lowered her hand slowly. Yaba stood at the door of that bridal shower and thanked me. She told me it felt like family. A week later, her mother had me fired for something I never did. She doesn't know that, and she should. Dede's voice was not hard. It was just clear the way things are clear when someone has spent enough time thinking about them. Not because I need her to be angry for me, but because Yaba is going to raise children one day, and the way she learns to see the people around her, the people who carry things and set up rooms and hold the pieces together, that comes from somewhere. It comes from you. What you teach her matters more than any contract you have ever signed. Miriam stood in the corridor of the Harrington Grand completely without words. Take the letter, Dede said, and her voice was gentle now. That's all I need. Clear my name on the record. Leave everything else. She picked up her clipboard. She nodded once. She walked down the corridor toward the service elevator, the same elevator she had stood in 22 months ago, holding a box, watching the doors close on 6 years of her life. This time she walked in with her head up. The following Sunday, a check arrived in the mail at the Ottawa Cultural Center. It was made out to the center itself, not to any individual. There was no note. The memo line was blank. The amount was enough to cover the deferred building maintenance, a new sound system for the main hall, and 18 months of programming. The executive director posted about the anonymous gift on the center's page. In the comments, one of the Tuesday tea regulars, an elderly woman named Mrs. Quarty, who had been coming every week for a year and who always arrived early because she had nowhere else to be, wrote, "God bless whoever sent this. This place saved me when I had nobody." That evening, in a house in Rockcliffe, Miriam sat at her kitchen table and called her daughter. Yaba answered on the second ring, her voice bright and easy. "Mama, how was the wedding?" Kafui said it was incredible. "It was," Miriam said. "Yaba, I need to tell you something. I need you to just listen until I'm done." A pause on the other end. "Okay, Mama, I'm listening." Miriam closed her eyes. Outside her window, Ottawa was dark and cold and very quiet. The kind of quiet that does not demand anything of you, that simply gives you room. She opened her eyes. She looked at the table. She took a slow breath. And she began.